Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be discussing my January 2022 state of the collection. As you can see, I'm currently using a Mirage luxury travel roll. However, my days of using this travel roll are numbered because I'm currently getting some WR4K genuine leather travel rolls made. 3 slot, 2 slot and 1 slot size respectively. Exactly the same design as this Mirage luxury travel roll with slotted cushions, but the difference is my WR4K travel roll is made from genuine leather compared to this Mirage luxury travel roll which is made from PU leather. So I'll be selling the 3 slot, 2 slot and 1 slot sizes on my eBay account shortly, which is Watch Reviews 4K. So the first thing I want to do in this state of the collection discussion is compare the Rolex Chrome Light on my Submariner with the Seiko Lume Bright on my Seiko 5 SRPE 63K1, because it's one of the reasons why I decided to add the Seiko 5 to my personal collection. I was really impressed with the quality of the performance of the Seiko Lume Bright, and I regard it to be equally quality to the Chrome Lights used on my Submariner. Right, so that's the Submariner fully charged up, and I'll do the same with the Seiko 5. And then we'll compare them side by side. Right, so that's now fully charged. And as you can see, in terms of brightness, on the left we have my Rolex Submariner, which has Chrome Light, and on the right we have my Seiko 5, which has Seiko Lume Bright. In terms of brightness, there is no discernible difference whatsoever. The performance of Lume Bright is equal quality to Rolex Chrome Light. And it's very impressive because the current market value on the grey market of this Submariner 124060 is €12,500. It's impossible to purchase them from Rolex authorised dealers unless one has a significant purchase history as a VIP level customer spending circa €100,000 per annum. So the reality is, to buy a Rolex Submariner 124060 in 2022, one has to buy it from the grey market. So it's $12,500, that is the reality. On the right, the Seiko 5 SRPE 63K1 can be purchased from Creation Watches for €151, so massive price difference. But if you look at the lume performance of the Lume Bright on the Seiko 5 on the right versus the Chrome Light on the Submariner on the left, they're both glowing very brightly. And there's a green tone to the Lume Bright versus the blue tone of the Chrome Lights, but I actually prefer the green tone of the Lume Bright. And it's a mistake that I think Rolex made when they upgraded from using Super Luminova on the Submariner and Submariner Date to using Chrome Lights. I think the green tone of Tritium and also Super Luminova was more aesthetically pleasing. And it's something I really like about the Seiko 5 because it has that characteristic green tone which looks like C3 Super Luminova and also Tritium. And I think that green Luminova and Super Luminova is more aesthetically pleasing. It's something I dislike about Rolex, the ceramic era of the Submariner and Submariner Date, such as this 124060 that uses blue coloured lume. I think it would look better with green coloured lume. Now if you look at the emitter in both of the exciter in both of the lumes respectively, the Chrome Light and the Lume Bright, they are equal in terms of their brightness. The exciter used in both of the lume is glowing very brightly, and it will continue to glow for a good length of time. Now in terms of legibility, as you can see, the Seiko 5 has a similar dial layout to the Submariner maxi dial layouts with the large rectangular indices at 9, 6 and 3 o'clock, and on the right, we also have very similar circular indices for the other hours and a large triangle at 12 o'clock. So the orientation of the dials is very similar, and also the legibility in terms of the functionality, how easy it is to read both dials, is equal. So this is something that really impressed me. I previously reviewed the bracelet version of this watch, which was the SRPE 53K1. And I really like the dial layout, the blue sunburst dial, and also like the colour of the green Lume Bright, and it was one of the reasons why I considered adding that watch to my collection. But one thing I disliked about it was the mirror polished bezel on the SRPE 53K1, which is the bracelet version. Then later, after my review, Seiko released this version, which is the 63K1 on a blue navy NATO strap, and I really like the brushed satin bezel versus the mirror polished one that comes on the 53K one respectively. And it gives it a more tool watch aesthetic, and I think it complements the brushed satin finishing to the tops of the case. The one thing I really like about it, and I've only noticed it recently, is in between the lugs is mirror polished to a flawless standard. And this is something that Seiko deserve full credit for, because it's often a cost-cutting measure that other brands in the low tier neglect to do. They leave in between the lugs machine finish or alternatively brushed satin finish. They don't mirror polish because it adds to the production cost of the piece, and of course the margins on low tier pieces in terms of profit margin is much lower than on mid tier and high tier pieces. So therefore they can't justify mirror polishing in between the lugs to the same high standard as on the flanks of the case, because often it's hidden by a bracelet, for example, so there's no point in polishing areas of the case that a collector isn't going to see. Now this watch comes on a NATO strap, so Seiko have mirror polished in between the lugs because it is an area that collectors are going to see, and I absolutely love the quality of the case finishing to the head of the piece. Now I've previously owned several SKX 007s and several SKX 009s. I've reviewed the SKX 009 on my channel, and I modified that piece with the strap code Super Oboya bracelet to enhance the piece. And I can honestly say that the comfort level of this Seiko 5 is superior to the SKX series, such as the 009, because on the SKX 007 and SKX 009, they have a stainless steel screw-down case back, and that has an embossed wave on the back of it, the wave of Hiragawa. Now the problem with that is it doesn't feel as comfortable against the wrist when wearing the piece for long periods of time. And it also has a more bubble back profile to it. With the Seiko 5 series, they have this exhibition case back which is glazed with mineral crystal. Now the benefit of having a flat mineral crystal is it is perfectly smooth and it fits very snugly against the wrist, but it actually feels more comfortable to wear for 8 to 12 hours per day. I always found that the bubble back case backs on the SKX 007 and 009, because of that embossing of the wave of Hiragawa, they're not as comfortable. One can feel the textured finish to the case back on the SKX. So I actually prefer this screw down exhibition case back because of the comfort level. And I also think it's more aesthetically pleasing to be able to see the movement, the 4R36. On the SKX, one cannot see the 7S26 movement because of the solid stainless steel case back. Now, of course, the negative is this only provides 100 meters of hermetic seal, as does the push-pull crown. On an SKX it's 200 meters due to the solid case back and the screw-down crown, but I actually prefer this to the SKX, having owned both. So I'll give you wrist shots of both pieces and I'll discuss what I really like about this Submariner. Now, to give you a background to my collecting, for those of you that are unaware, I purchased my first Rolex Submariner 23 years ago, and it took me 2 years to save up, from 19 years to 21 years old, when I was a university student. And why did I do that? Well, I saw Roger Moore wearing a 5513 Submariner in the James Bond film Live and Let Die, and that 5513 had a buzzsaw bezel which Roger Moore used to cut a rope which was tying his hands together, and it's always stuck in my mind as being a cool watch. And that was the first time that I saw a Rolex Submariner, and it sparked my interest in Rolex watches. And I always wanted a Rolex Submariner after seeing it. So when I was 19, I made the decision I wanted to purchase a piece. And at that point, the 5513 Submariner had been discontinued, and it had been succeeded by the 14060 and 14060M. M denoted modified because the movement was upgraded from the caliber 3000 to the caliber 3130. So I decided I was going to buy a 14060M, which was the current Submariner of the day. The problem was, at 19, being a university student, I didn't have the funds needed to purchase the watch. So it took me 2 years to save up, from 19 to 21, and then when I graduated from university, I had the £2,500 needed to purchase a pre-owned 14060M from a grey dealer, and that was a box and papers full set piece. And I can honestly say that was one of the happiest days of my life. The highest of highs, the incredible dopamine rush, was the precise moment that sparked my interest in watch collecting, and that's where it began. I didn't take the normal conventional route of collectors, for example purchasing low tier pieces such as Seiko 5s, Vostok Amphibias, and then working up to a Seiko SKX 007, and then moving up to mid tier pieces such as Steinhardt Ocean 1s, and then high tier pieces such as Rolex, Omega or Tudor. I started off with a heavy hitter, the 146DM. Now, £2,500 was a lot of money when I was 19, and at the time my friends were critical of that because they said, well, why don't you purchase a car, and why don't you spend the money on something like that, a Golf GTI for example. But I decided that I really wanted the Submariner so much that I would make those sacrifices, and I did without a £2,500 car. I decided to spend it on a watch. So ever since then, I've always liked the Submariner. Now, I've owned several over the years. I've owned a two-tone Submariner. I've owned a Hulk. You've seen on my channel, I've also reviewed the Submariner dates, and I also owned the Submariner, which is the predecessor to this, the 114060. I prefer this 124060 to all of the previous Submariner and Submariner dates I've owned, and the reason is Rolex made a mistake with the predecessor to this watch, the 114060. It had the super case with thick lugs, a very square block-like case. It was like a slab of oyster steel. And I always disliked the square profile, the thick lugs on the 114060. Now on this 124060, they slimmed down the lugs. The other change they made was they increased the lug width from 20mm to 21mm respectively, and that increased the taper of the oyster bracelet from 21mm down to the clasp, which they also scaled up in thickness. So the clasp is wider, it's thicker, as is the bracelet. The proportions are better done, and the slimmer lugs are more aesthetically pleasing, so it's a better balanced piece. The 114060 always felt top heavy, and the bracelet was too slender. It was 20mm tapering to 16. And I always disliked that top heavy feeling about it, and the look of the square profile thick lugs with the slender bracelet. With this having a 21mm lug width, it better balances the thinner lugs, as you can see, and it fits my 8-inch wrist to perfection. It's like a bespoke watch which is tailor-made. And I really like the lug-to-lug measurement. It's very close to 48, which I consider to be perfection. And the case is 41, which is also perfect for my 8-inch wrist. Now, I've owned both the Submariner dates and the Submariner, and I can honestly say that I prefer the flat sapphire crystal to the Submariner without the Cyclops magnifier, and I like the symmetry of the dial with the absence of the date complication. So I purchased the piece in October from a grey dealer in Holland called kramerwatches.nl, and I highly recommend Kramer Watches. Outstanding customer service from the owner, Klaus Kramer. And I can honestly say that when I put this on for the first time, I felt an immediate connection with the watch, and it's something I don't always get. For example, I've reviewed over 200 watches on my channel at this stage, and I immediately get a connection with the watch instantly when I put it on, or I don't, and that doesn't change. So I got a connection with this watch when I first put it on, and I get the same feel-good factor as the first I put it on, and it made me love the watch. I thought this is the perfect Submariner. Of all the Rolex watches I've owned several. This is my personal favourite, so I absolutely love it. Now, the interesting thing is, this is only €151 versus the other piece, which is it's €12,500. I get the same connection with this Seiko 5, the SRPE 63K1. I think this is one of the greatest Seikos ever made, and I've owned several Seiko watches, the Seiko Turtle, the Seiko Sumo, and SKX 007, SKX 009 for example, and several Seiko 5s. And I can honestly say that I prefer this to more expensive Seiko Prospex pieces such as the Marine Master, the Tuner, the Turtle. This is a better looking piece. Seiko really have got this perfected because they even got the proportions of the hands correct for the case. It's slightly smaller in proportions than the SKX 007 case, despite looking very similar with the crown at 4 o'clock. They scaled down the proportions of the hands for the SRPE series, this Seiko 5KX, or the Dress KX as it's nicknamed, and they got it right. The hands are just the right proportion for the slightly smaller case, slightly smaller dial. And I absolutely love the applied silver indices. Now on the SKX, they have printed dials, and I think that this Seiko 5 dial looks better with the applied indices because it catches the light. One can see the silver outline of the applied indices, which complements the silver handset. And the other thing is the small attention to detail, because for example now it's Sunday the 10th, and if you look at Sunday it's in red. And I really like that thing of having a roulette style date wheel. For example, I would prefer if many brands used roulette date wheels that alternate between black and red. Alternatively, just use red, because red is more contrasting with a white date wheel than black. And it's something one sees on vintage pieces. They used roulette date wheels, for example, vintage Tudor Snowflake Submariners. And I really like the fact that Sunday is in red, which contrasts with the other days of the week in black, and Saturday's in blue. So it's just absolutely gorgeous. The silver Seiko applied logo is something else I really like, and again, that's something one doesn't get with the SKX. And so really, it's a better done dial. Now, the bezel is my personal favourite thing about the watch, because as I've discussed, I previously reviewed the bracelet version, the SRPE 53K1, which is the same watch, except it has a mirror polished bezel. And I really dislike the mirror polished bezel on it, because it really gives it a dress watch aesthetic. This has a more military issued or tool watch aesthetic due to the brushed satin finishing to the bezel, and it's not as shiny as a result. Now, with regards to the strap, I've previously reviewed two Hirsch straps. This is one of them, the Hirsch camel grain strap, and as you can see, it's honey coloured. I absolutely love the camel grain finish. It's got a nice 3D effect to it. It's padded, stitching is absolutely flawless, and flawless finishing to the buckle, which is signed with the Hirsch brand emblem. Now, this is one of the most comfortable straps I've ever had on a watch, and I absolutely love the look of it. I love the comfort level, and as you can see, the underside is perfectly smooth. So it's just one of the greatest Hirsch straps. I've always used Hirsch leather straps on my watches because the quality is just incredible. It's the XL version, so as I've shown you before, it fits my 8-inch wrist to perfection as if it's a bespoke made strap. It really does feel like a tailor-made strap. It fits my wrist perfectly. Just bear with me and I'll engage the second keeper into it. And then I'll show you the fit is correct. Right, so even with my 8-inch wrist, there is still length available on the end of the strap, as you can see. And I've got 3 holes before the buckle and tang, and I've still got 2 holes after the buckle and tang, so plenty of length. Now, as you'll know from my previous reviews, I like to wear my watches and straps loose so that I can fit an index finger underneath the bracelet or strap at all times, and that is the correct sizing method because it allows for wrist expansion in warmer weather or when one is active playing sports, for example. And it just gives the perfect fit. The comfort level of this watch is 10 out of 10. It is just sublime. And I really like the match between the blue sunburst dial and the contrast of the honey camel grain strap. This really works, and I've seen this done on other collectors have done it with other Seiko 5s with blue sunburst dials. I saw them with honey straps, and when I saw pictures online of the honey strap with the blue sunburst dial, it really made me want to have a watch like that. So I thought I have to have a Seiko 5 with a blue sunburst dial and a honey strap because they just work so well. And the only thing that was putting me off doing it was the mirror polished bezel of the SRPE 53K1 because I thought it looks too much like a dress watch. I wanted a more tool watch aesthetic. Absolutely love it. Now, I could modify this with a double dome sapphire crystal with clear AR coating, and of course that would further enhance it because the sapphire crystal would be more scratch resistant and the clear AR coating would be better than the hard Lex. As you can see, it doesn't have AR coating. But I've decided to leave it standard. I'm not going to modify it with a sapphire crystal. I'm actually going to leave it as it is because I can put up with the reflection of the no AR coating on the underside of the Hardex. I like the original look. I don't want to modify it to something different from the original. In this case, I think it is perfection as it is. And I could put a flat sapphire crystal in it, but really it's not worth the enhancement of AR coating. I can still read it with the silver applied indices and the silver handset, so the functionality is good enough. But really, the comfort level is 10 out of 10. The feel-good factor is 10 out of 10. It's got a relatively short lug-to-lug measurement. It's below the 48mm, which is perfection, but it's good. Curved undercut profile, very comfortable, very lightweight, very well balanced. Now, this is the thing. The feel-good factor of this piece is exactly as good as the feel-good factor of wearing my Submariner. And as I've detailed, this is something which is unusual. Often collectors have this misconception that the more one pays for a watch, the better the feel-good factor. and so therefore the more expensive the piece, the more pleasure they'll get from it, and it's a mistake. I've often owned low tier pieces, mid tier pieces and high tier pieces, and I can honestly tell you that the amount of money one pays for a piece bears no relation whatsoever to the feel good factor, the ultimate satisfaction of the piece. So for example, this €12,500 Submariner gives me the same level of feel good factor as this €150 Seiko 5, and it really shouldn't be like that. It should be the Rolex Submariner gives more pleasure, gives more feel-good factor. The Seiko 5 shouldn't be anything like as good. But the truth is, I wear these two pieces in rotation on a daily basis. This has a 70-hour power reserve versus this with a 40-hour power reserve. So by wearing them daily in rotation and rotating them, it means I don't have to manually wind them to top up the power reserve. This will last for nearly 3 days. This lasts for over 2 days. Now, the point is, I like wearing both watches, and I can honestly say that when I look down on my wrist, it doesn't matter to me if I'm wearing a Rolex or a Seiko 5. I like both watches, and I like the variety of having a black glossy dial versus a blue sunburst dial. This is a time-only piece. This has a day-date complication, so the functionality of both pieces is good. If I need a watch for the date, I can use this piece. If I just want the time, I can just wear this piece. This is 300 metres water resistant, this is 100 metres, so really they're perfectly adequate as daily wear pieces, and I like both of them. So this is the point I want you to consider. As a collector, don't always think I have to upgrade. For example, don't start off with low tier pieces such as a Seiko 5 or a Vostok Amphibia and then feel the urge I have to move up to an SKX 007 or a Seiko Turtle or a Seiko Marine Master, and then move up to a Steinhardt Ocean 1, and then move up to a Rolex Submariner or a Tudor Black Bay or an Omega Seamaster. They are often the routes that collectors take. They move up from low tier to mid tier to high tier pieces. Consider the feel good factor. Really, I think that collectors often make the mistake of purchasing watches because of pressure. For example, they look online at watch forums, and they also watch YouTube videos, and they're often influenced by that. They're pressurized into thinking, well, I can't just own a Seiko 5, I need to have something better, I need to upgrade to an SKX 007, or I need to upgrade to a Steinhardt Ocean 1. And it's never ending because they end up buying a Rolex Submariner at the end of it all. Having gone through that journey, watch collectors often talk about the journey, but I started off with a Submariner, and I'm now wearing a Seiko 5 as one of my two pieces, and I think it's absolute nonsense to have to move up from a low tier to a mid tier piece to a high tier piece. I've owned them all. I've owned the Steinhardt Ocean 1, I've owned Submariners, several of them, and I can honestly say that the feel good factor really doesn't bear any relation to the amount of money I've spent on watches. Overall, I think that these make a very good two-piece collection. I think the Seiko 5 is very good if you have a budget of €151. This is the perfect daily wear piece. If you have a budget of €12,500, then yes, the Submariner is a very good daily wear piece. But is it worth €12,500? The truth is no. The true value of this watch is $2,000. The reality is that the Submariner with a caliber 3230, which is an excellent movement, it's technically excellent, it's a chronology movement, highly efficient, 70-hour power reserve, 10-year service interval, it's still only a €2,000 watch. There are several things about this watch. I'll talk about the negatives, for example. Unlike many Rolex fanboys, I'm able to talk about a watch's negatives as well as the positives. I don't just talk about this watch as a fanboy and make out it's the perfect watch. The truth is it's not the perfect watch. It's a €2,000 watch which is sold on the grey market for $12,500, which is very expensive. The platinum inlay in the Cerachrome bezel is something that I think that Rolex made a mistake with. Ironically, I've previously reviewed homages to the Submariner, such as the Steinhardt Ocean 1 and the San Martin SN017G and SN019G. And I actually prefer those pieces because they use white paint in the engraved ceramic bezel, because the truth is the white paint is more legible than the platinum used on this Submariner. The platinum has a dull matte grey finish to it, and it's not actually as legible as white paint. It's ironic that Rolex use platinum rather than white paint when white paint would actually look better. Now, the other thing is, I think they should upgrade it to using a fully lumed ceramic bezel insert as per the Tudor Pelagos, because that is a better looking bezel, and a fully lumed ceramic bezel insert would be better than a Cerachrome bezel, which is inlaid with platinum. Now, there's something else. I have had to move one of the links from the 6 o'clock side to the 12 o'clock side. I'll show you what the problem is with having an 8-inch wrist. Rolex make the Submariner to fit up to an 8-inch wrist, but 8 inches is the absolute maximum. I've had this problem on every Rolex watch, the Submariner and Submariner Date that I've purchased, with the glide lock never sits centrally on my wrist. It always sits offset to one side. It sits too far to the 6 o'clock side of the head of the piece, and it never feels comfortable, because the problem with the glide lock sitting off centre is it keeps pulling the watch off centre on the wrist. It doesn't sit above the wrist bone, it moves to one side constantly, so one has to keep moving the watch, and it's really annoying. There are 12 links in a full-size Oyster bracelet, and the way Rolex makes them for some reason is they put 7 links on one side and 5 links on the other, which doesn't make sense. They should put 6 and 6, because if they put 6 on one side and 6 on the other, then the glide lock clasp would sit symmetrically on the wrist, as it does now, because I took out one link from this side and I moved it over to this side, and that had the effect of moving the glide lock central on my wrist, and as you can see, it now fits correctly. But there is a problem, and I've actually ordered another Oyster link from a Rolex authorised dealer, and of course they don't have them in stock. I have to wait for them to come from the link to come from Rolex SA Geneva. And the other problem is I have to go to the Rolex authorised dealer and they want to put the link into the watch. With my Oyster Perpetual 41, I ordered 2 links and the authorised dealer posted them to me and I put them in myself. They've now stopped doing that. I have to take the watch into the Rolex authorised dealer to verify it's a correct piece, not a counterfeit, and then they want to put the link in themselves. So it's a real pain. Now, with the glide lock, I can only use it on full extension. If you look at the underside of it, it's now on its absolute maximum. It's on the last click. Now it fits my 8-inch wrist to perfection on the last click, which is great, because as you can see, I can fit my index finger underneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, which is the correct method. But I can't use the glide lock. For example, if I move the glide lock in, it becomes immediately too tight. So I've got a glide lock clasp on my Submariner, which is negligible. It doesn't actually benefit me. I can't use it, so I need to put an extra link into it. So I'm going to have 7 links on one side, and then I'll be able to move it in and out by a link for some extra adjustment. So that's the problem with Rolex watches. They're only made for collectors with a maximum 8-inch wrist, and if you do have an 8-inch wrist, you have to have the glide lock on maximum extension, as I've discussed. So I would like them to change the bezel to a fully lumed bezel as per the Pelagos, or alternatively change the white paint. The platinum isn't as good. And also, with regards to the bracelets, they have got the proportions better, but it's still not perfect. The reason why I say that is they've made the glide lock clasp on this piece, the 124060, too thick. The width is good, but the actual thickness of the clasp is now too thick. It was better proportions on the 114060, the predecessor to this watch. So really, they got the taper on the bracelet correct from 21 down to 18, but they didn't get the proportions of the glide lock correct. It's more like a Sea Dweller proportioned glide lock, which is too wide for the Submariner. And although it's well balanced, it's not perfect. So I think that they could refine the glide lock and improve upon it. I actually prefer the 2-button push clasp used on the Omega Seamaster and the Planet Ocean. I think that's a superior looking mechanism, and I also think that it's better looking. I don't like the sharp edges and the sharp profile, the square profile to the glide lock. I think the curved profile of the Seamaster and Planet Ocean 2-button push clasp is better done. So it's a €2,000 watch. There is room for improvement. I think the movement is excellent. The watch itself really isn't worth more than $2,000, but of course it's retailed for more, and on the grey market it's significantly more than that due to the difficulty in buying the piece. In comparison, the Seiko 5, at €151. Yes, this is the correct price. The 4R36 is an excellent movement, hand winding and hacking, 40-hour power reserve, perfectly acceptable, very reliable movements. And the reality is these movements are never serviced. One doesn't service a 4R36. It's more cost effective just to replace the movement with a new one every 10 years. Often the 4R36 will be used for 20 years without any servicing whatsoever, and they never break down, they never fail. So when they do fail or break down, it really is better to just replace them with a new one. So the 4R36 is one of my favourite movements. The same movement was used in the Seiko Turtle I owned, the SRP 773, which I thought was an outstanding piece. And it's very good to get a 4R36 used in higher grades Seiko pieces like the Turtle in a Seiko 5 for €151. So I really like that about it. I like the hand winding and hacking, the day-date complication, 40-hour power reserve. It's very good. The only thing I would change about this piece is I would like to see Seiko use a sapphire crystal with AR coating, and I would also like to see a screw-down crown, but of course one isn't going to get that in a Seiko 5. They always have push-pull crowns. So really that's all I have to say with regards to my two pieces, my Submariner and my Seiko 5. Absolutely love both watches. Both feel good factor is excellent. Highly recommend both pieces to you for your consideration. Hope you've enjoyed my discussion of my January 2022 State of the Collection. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you very much.